artillery blast. Can everybody hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
I might turn down. Go ahead.
Anyway, couple of things before I start the program. I know you've been to Gettysburg a million times, and one place I want to recommend is the George Lomas Historical Museum. I don't know if you've been there or not, but it's probably the best. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's probably. You should. I can do the whole thing without the mic.
Hey, Ricky, Pat's got
I
some projections.
can-
You probably get the mic,
So
so
much for technology. Come on, I'm old school.
he's got a command voice.
All right.
He can handle this.
He made a squeal so he wouldn't have the mic.
It was planned. Anyway, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, great.
Bring uphill.
Anyway, yeah, down goes through with that thing. Now, I just want to say that if you have an opportunity, check out the Lomas Museum at Gettysburg. It's probably the best private museum in the town. It's a museum that has not only Civil War, but all military history. Matter of fact, my father is in there, believe it or not. No, he's not on display. But I just want you to know, there's a picture of him with his ship from World War II. And also, they have on display, the crown jewel is Ordnance Cannon #1 that A.P. Hill's men captured during the first day of Gettysburg. So you can check that out. And I'm going to just leave this here, and then y'all can take it on your way out or whatever, okay? And believe it or not, you heard it from me. They got the best bathroom in the whole town. Yeah.
Is it the only one?
No, there's men and women too, okay? Okay, one more thing, serious note now. I'm on the board of directors of the A.P. Hill Memorial Association. As you well know, a lot of the statues came down in Richmond a couple of years ago. A.P. Hill was the last one to come down because he was buried underneath that. Well, I want you to know, a year and a half ago, on January the 21st, 2023, we buried A.P. Hill for the 4th time. That's another story. He had military honors, and the flag that was over his casket was presented to me when it was all over by the Hill family. One of the greatest honors of my life.
Wow.
So what we're trying to do is trying to recover the statue, because we're not calling it a statue, we're not calling it a monument, it's a headstone, because the man was buried underneath that. So there's going to be a court case coming up. And so if you're interested, I have here replicas of the flag that was over his casket. Okay, and it's a unreconstructed Virginia flag. Now it's known as the A.P. Hill flag, because as I said, it was over his casket. If you want to make a donation of $40, you're more than interested in getting one of these flags. So if you want to look at it afterwards, fine. But I just want to let you know, we're really trying to retrieve the headstone before who knows what may happen to it. Okay, now then, we're going to talk about Saddle Up with General Hill. Famous generals and their war horses. Of course, we're going to start with General Hill. Now then, when General Hill was very young, or I should say before he was a general, in younger days, his mother would read to him. She would read Shakespeare and military histories. Among his favorite people were Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. They wore red. Someday, back of his mind, I want to be a soldier just like them. I know they wore a red cloak, a red sash, but someday I'm going to wear red, leading a lot of men into battle. And so when the war became, later on, he did wear red, a red battle shirt. His men called it his hunting shirt. So that's why I'm wearing this evening. But his father would take him hunting and fishing and horseback riding, and he loved to go riding. And he loved horse flesh so much. He loved beautiful thoroughbreds, ride fast. And so we're going to talk about him doing something special in the midst of the war, where most people never talk about. I'm going to tell you something now. You must remember this. It is 1862. It's the capital of the Confederate States of America, Richmond, Virginia. If Richmond falls, Virginia falls. If Virginia falls, the Confederacy falls. Remember that. June 1st, 1862, Robert E. Lee assumes command of the Army of Northern Virginia, and A.P. Hill christens his command the Light Division. He trains it for speed. You get there in the right place at the right time. Now here it is. There's a threat to the capital of Richmond by George McClellan, A.P. Hill's old roommate at West Point. So now, Robert E. Lee decides to have a council of war at the Dab House in Richmond. This is on the 23rd of May. I should say 23rd of June, because prior to that, during the battles around Richmond, during the Peninsula Campaign, with George McClellan kept on fighting and pushing, but he never could take the capital. But now, with Robert E. Lee in command at the Dab House, he would assemble his major generals, his division commanders. He would have James Longstreet. He would have Stonewall Jackson. He would have D.H. Hill and A.P. Hill. Those two Hills were not related. So now, the timing of these attacks against the federal forces of George McClellan and the Federal Army would center around the arrival of Stonewall Jackson, who just had a magnificent Valley campaign in the Shenandoah Valley. So Jackson said he could have his men ready to attack those federal forces in a couple of days, on the 25th of June. Well, Lee and the other generals thought that was cutting a little bit too close. So now, the 26th of June will be the attack, led by Stonewall Jackson. Well, the 26th arrives and A.P. Hill's there on his horse, his war horse, Prince. It is a black stallion. He's in his red battle shirt, ready. But when he got the word to attack from Stonewall Jackson, 12 o'clock arrives. No Stonewall Jackson. 1 o'clock arrives. Still no Stonewall Jackson. A.P. Hill's getting kind of antsy right now. 3 o'clock and still no Stonewall Jackson. So A.P. Hill took it upon himself to initiate that attack and push across the Chickahominy River. And he's getting hit hard. It's the Battle of Mechanicsville. His light division that he trained so much right there around the capital of Richmond gets hit hard because Stonewall Jackson never shows up. The next day, 27th, Lee decided to have General Longstreet and Hill fight together. They're two divisions waiting for the arrival of Stonewall Jackson. And so what happens at the Battle of Gaines Mill? Again, A.P. Hill's light division is in hard. Why? Because Stonewall Jackson never shows up. 3 days later, Battle of Courageous Farm. It is a battle that takes place right near the gates of the Confederate capital. And what is that A.P. Hill going to do? He is there. He commands that section of the battlefield. There he is in his red battle shirt. Yes. And not only does he have his hat on, he is all set. His men see him. He has his yellow gauntlets on. He always wanted to lead a great many men in a battle, in a desperate battle. Well, this is a desperate battle, ladies and gentlemen. The Union forces, those federal forces, were getting closer and closer and closer to that part of the field where A.P. Hill was in command. But there was a gap, and those federal forces were trying to break through that gap. And so what did A.P. Hill do? He saw the 7th North Carolina. He saw their infantry, and so he went up to them. He grabbed their flag. Use your imagination, ladies and gentlemen. Use your imagination. This is the flag of the North Carolinians, the 7th North Carolina. He said, if you do not follow me, I'll die alone. But they did. They did follow him. And with that, he saved the capital of Richmond. But while this was going on, he was being observed by two people who had no business being out on that battlefield. Yes, those two people were the President of the Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis, and General Robert E. Lee, the overall commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. They were observing everything. They saw A.P. Hill grab that flag. He looked like the god of war at that moment. So what happened? General Lee and President Davis started riding their horses on the battlefield in that same section. And all artillery is going around them. A.P. Hill sees that. So he rides up and he actually encounters both Lee and President Davis. And he says, General and President, I am commander of this field. You must leave at once. I order you to leave. Ordering President Davis, ordering General Lee. They look at one another and they see this person, A.P. Hill, they all know who he was, the little pal himself, in the red shirt. Yes, we will obey your orders. So they ride off. They ride off. Where did it say? But the battle is still raging on. And so, while A.P. Hill still is there, commanding the troops to go forward, to stop those Yankees, and artillery is still going around, but who decides to come back on the battlefield? Lee and President Davis.
That's a nice thing you got there.
And while artillery shells are busting all around them, A.P. Hill on Prince, he is angry now. He rides up at breakneck speed. President Davis, General Lee, did you not promise to go into a safe area behind the battlefield? Why? One artillery shell from over yonder may here hit both of you, kill both of you, and the country would lose its General Robert E. Lee and its President Jefferson Davis. And then what would happen? There would be no Confederacy. There would be no army. Please withdraw from the field. Well, they do. They do leave the field this time, and they stay behind the lines. But it's A.P. Hill at that particular moment. Make sure that President Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee are out of harm's way. Now, after the 7 days battles, Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia finally pushed George McClellan away from the Confederate capital. But just think, ladies and gentlemen, what the future will hold. A.P. Hill on Prince in his red battle shirt will go on and save Stonewall Jackson at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. And again, there would be A.P. Hill who would come out after 17 miles, 7 hours from Harper's Ferry to Sharpsburg and say, Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia. Who knows what might have happened if he did not arrive in the nick of time. But just think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If A.P. Hill was not there on June 30th at the Battle of Frazier's Farm, who knows what might have happened? Remember what I said? If Richmond falls, Virginia falls. If Virginia falls, the Confederacy falls. What might have happened if General Robert E. Lee and President Jefferson Davis were actually killed on that battlefield? So you may think about this, take it home with you, keep thinking about it. Just think what might have happened if A.P. Hill did not get there in the nick of time. The war might have ended right then and there. So think about that, because I have another general I am going to talk about. I thought about, who am I going to talk about? It's saddle up with General Hill. Famous generals and their war horses. Well, there are many generals I could have talked about, but there's one in particular I wanted to do. And I am doing this in honor of somebody here in this room. I understand there is a new member of the Little Bighorn Associates. Ricky?
We got two, Rich Burton and Sue.
Really? You're members? A Little Bighorn? I'm a member of Little Bighorn Associates. So, On the other side of the coin of General A.P. Hill, we are going to talk about George Armstrong Custer. Oh, all right. Now you're really going to have to use your imagination. I do not have a Yankee suit. I'm not talking about the New York Yankees. I'm talking about a Yankee from the Civil War. I do not have one of those. But the reason I'm putting this on, as I said, use your imagination. You saw the A.P. Hill hat right here. He wore a plain hat just like this. This is a replica of the Museum of the Confederacy. It was on display. Matter of fact, my wife made this hat back in the day, and I wore this in the movie Gettysburg. So I'm going to put this hat on, representing George Armstrong Custer. And I am going to put this belt on. In 1 second, let me get this last button on over here. And the reason is because George Armstrong Custer was probably the most famous cavalryman, not only in the Civil War, after the Civil War, but probably in all time. Why? More has been written about George Armstrong Custer than probably any other cavalryman or soldier than anybody else. Because when you think of it, George Armstrong Custer, books have been written about him. Statues have been erected to George Armstrong Custer. Poems have been written about him. So many things. Movies have been written, made about George Armstrong Custer. So many famous people have played George Armstrong Custer. Errol Flynn, and they died with their boots on. So I just want to say that George Armstrong Custer is probably the most famous cavalryman of them all. Not only did people want to read about him during the Civil War, because he was the boy general. He was the boy general who, at 23 years old, right before the Battle of Gettysburg, out west, he was out there fighting the Indians in his buckskin jacket, leading the 7th Cavalry. So George Armstrong Custer, he wanted everybody to notice him, starting with his uniform. A few days before the Battle of Gettysburg, he gets promoted to Brigadier General, age 23. So he had a hat similar to this that he wore over his long blonde locks. Like I said, use your imagination, okay? And he had a big blonde mustache, a little goatee in front. His blue velveteen uniform with braids going up his shoulder, plus his big gauntlets, double-breasted in gold, sailor shirt on in blue with 2 stars, one on each side. He had large black cavalry boots, accented with golden spurs. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, George Armstrong Custer, in that uniform, he looked like a circus rider gone mad. And that's not by me, that's by them. He probably had more horses killed from under him than any other soldier. Well, almost any other soldier. I think Nathan Bedford Forrest had more. So, I'm not going to talk about all the exploits of George Armstrong Custer. I'm going to talk about one particular horse of George Armstrong Custer's. Ricky, I'm going to talk about the horse that George Armstrong Custer stole. He stole a horse. And the name of that horse was Don Juan. Yes. After Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia on April the 9th, a few weeks after that, on April the 25th, word was getting around Richmond, Virginia, there was a particular horse a thoroughbred horse, one of the most finest horse in the city of Richmond. And General Sheridan had given orders, all horses within the Confederate capital should be confiscated. Well, rumor had it there was a particular horse, and members of the 3rd Cavalry Division wanted to get that horse for George Armstrong Custer. Well, somebody of the 3rd Cavalry Division was tipped off about this particular horse, and they found the horse. Not only did they find the horse, they found the pedigree papers of the name Don Juan. So not only did they steal the horse, they took the pedigree papers and they brought it to General Custer. Custer looked at his horse. He decided this horse must be mine. So those pedigree papers that had the name of the original owner were crossed off. And whose name do you think were put there? George Armstrong Custer. Not only did he have the horse, but he had the papers to prove that it was his horse. So now, Don Juan and George Armstrong Custer would keep riding together, and people would look at him in his fancy uniform and this beautiful horse. Would you like to have a horse like that, ladies and gentlemen? I'm sure you would. Why? Because of that name. On the count of 3, I want everybody with your emotion inside to name that horse. 1, 2, 3. Don Juan! Well, May the 23rd arrives. It is the Grand Parade, the Grand Review in Washington, D.C. It is victory, a victory parade right there in our nation's capital. Leading the parade would be George Meade, the Army of the Potomac. He would lead it with his staff. In the reviewing stand would be President Johnson, General Grant, and General William Tecumseh Sherman, and all the congressmen and the senators would all be there to relish in the great victory over the Confederate States of America. So now, the parade starts, and everybody sees George Armstrong Custer, and all the ladies love him. So they start throwing flowers in front of him. And so this one particular woman who truly was in love with George Armstrong Custer, she gets a whole bouquet, a big wreath, and tosses it right at Custer. And right then and there, the drums started beating. And this was a thoroughbred racehorse. As soon as he would hear the drums, he would get on and he would start riding. The horse would rear up, and there would be Custer trying to hold on to the wreath, trying to hold on to his sword, and trying to hold on to his hat all at once. How can you do something like that? But he was going to do it. So he kept riding, the horse would rear up, and then Custer's hat would fall off. His sword would fall off, but he kept holding on. He kept holding on to that wreath of flowers. And that horse, at breakneck speed, would go past General Meade and his staff of the Army of the Potomac. And that's right then and there. The horse would rear up, and Custer's trying to hold on to the horse, hold on to himself, so he would not fall. But it's right there at the reviewing stand in front of the President of the United States, in front of General Grant, and in front of General Sherman. He finally controls the horse, and everybody goes wild. And of course, George Armstrong Custer, who loved attention, was eating this up. But George Armstrong Custer upstaged the entire Grand Review on that day, celebrating the victory of the United States over the Confederate States. All the newspapers, everybody in town, everyone would write about George Armstrong Custer. Well, and this would go on for days and days. That was the talk of the town. But somebody else was reading the newspapers. a gentleman by the name of Richard Gaines. Who was Richard Gaines? Richard Gaines was the original owner of Don Juan. So Richard Gaines, he starts giving his story to the local newspapers about how George Armstrong Custer, that Yankee, stole his horse in Richmond. Well, Custer at this time was down in New Orleans on his way to Texas. And he's reading the newspapers and he sees that Richard Gaines is after him. So what does Custer do? He brings Don Juan to the quartermaster there of the 3rd Cavalry, and he pays $125 and gets papers to prove that horse belongs to him. He sends the horse to Monroe, Michigan. Hopefully, this is George Custer's hometown. Hopefully, that when he finally returns back home, he will sell the horse for $10,000. Well, Custer goes to Texas, and Richard Gaines goes on and on and on. He wants his horse back. Well, word gets back to General Grant. And Grant is reading the newspapers, and he sees what happened. He sees that Custer stole this gentleman's horse, and it doesn't make the army look good. So General Grant decides to order General Sheridan to order Custer to return that horse. Well, Sheridan thinks about this, and he approaches his good friend, General Grant, and tells him that Sheridan himself had given orders to all his under him, his brigadier generals, his colonels, to siege any horse in the vicinity. So, if Don Juan must be given back to Richard Gaines, then every single horse confiscated in Richmond must go back to its owners. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Gaines never got that horse back. So Custer, in June of 1866, returns from Texas. Now here he is, back in his hometown of Monroe, Michigan. And just so happens, what was going on was the Michigan State Fair. So Custer decides to enter Don Juan at the fair. Guess what horse wins first prize? Come on, everybody, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
On one.
Why, you're a good judge of horse flesh, ladies and gentlemen. You are very good at that. Yes, Don Juan wins first prize. And so Custer is all set. He puts the horse for sale for $10,000. 1 month later, Don Juan suffers a stroke and he dies. And Custer has nothing. I want you to know, if you do go to Monroe, Michigan, on the outskirts, there's a large rock with a plaque on it. And it says, "Here lies the remains of Don Juan." It actually says it that way.
With emphasis.
Horse of General George Armstrong Custer. George Armstrong Custer, 10 years later, who died with his boots on at the Battle of Little Bighorn in Montana, June the 25th, 1876. He would be riding his war horse Vic at the time. But George Armstrong Custer got what he wanted more than anything else in this world: immortal glory. Not only does George Armstrong Custer get immortal glory, but the horse by the name of Don Juan also receives the glory. So I want you to know, this presentation was dedicated to Ricky because he's a new member and also, who else is a member of
Rich
the Little
Burton.
Big Horn Associates? Now, I am going to do a test. Everybody here. All right, you're all part of the act now. We all grew up loving the Westerns on TV, right? Remember all the Westerns? You grew up watching those and all the horses? I am going to test you. Let's see how far we can go back. Now then, don't get ahead of yourself. You're putting the
Champion.
cart before the horse right now, okay? Now we're gonna go way back to see how old you are. The great actor, silent films, William S. Hart. Do you remember William S. Hart? Did you ever hear of William S. Hart?
Oh, yeah.
He had a horse. Know his name? I give you a pass. Fritz. All right. But now we keep going a little further. Maybe you might know. All right. Tom Mix. Remember Tom Mix?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom Mix. Great cowboy. What was the name of his horse? We're not up there yet. Come on. Tom Mix. What was the name of his horse? Tony. Tony. No oats for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Now here, you better get this one. If not, I'm leaving. All right. If you don't get this, tell me who this is. I'm back in the saddle again. Gene Autry. What was the name of
Champion.
Gene Autry's horse? Champion. All right. Very good.
They changed it down
Lots of
one.
hate tonight, okay? Gene Autry and Champion. Oh. All right, here you go. Everybody wants this one. Roy Rogers. All right.
Buttercup.
You get the test. You're wrong. Dale Evans test. Dale Evans. What is it?
Buttermilk.
Butter-
But we're talking about the little rascals.
Buttermilk.
Buttermilk. You're right.
Oh, buttermilk.
They're wrong. All right. All right.
Yeah.
William Boyd as Hopalong Cassidy. I got you on that one, okay? What was Hopalong Cassidy's horse? If I say it, you'll kick yourself.
Don Juan?
Don't want multiple choice.
Topper.
Topper. Top. Oh, sure. Now you say, right, Topper.
Yeah.
All right, here you go. Everybody got to know this one. If not, the party's over. The Lone Ranger.
Silver.
Hi-yo, Silver! Get away! Okay, what was Tonto's horse's name?
There you go.
No, not there you go. What was the name of this horse?
Scout.
Scout, you're right.
Wow.
You're right. All right, now here's one. If you really, let's go to the movies back in the day. How many of you like Jimmy Stewart?
Good.
Jimmy Stewart was a great actor, right? He did. Do you know he played in 17 Westerns? And he rode the same horse in all 17?
Wow.
Matter of fact, back in the day, Johnny Carson, remember the old Johnny Carson show?
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart appeared and he recited a poem about his horse. Remember the name of the horse? All right, my wife, what's the name of the horse? Pie.
Pie?
Yeah, like an apple pie. Pie. And the next time you see Jimmy Stewart riding a horse, look at the horn on the horse on the saddle. This little bell. Jimmy Stewart was not the greatest, rider in the world, but that horse knew what to do when he heard that bell. Okay. Now here you go. I'm going to give you this: early John Wayne and late John Wayne. John Wayne made 169 movies. All right. In the early days, he rode a white horse. Okay. What was the name of the white horse? John Wayne. Come on, put it together.
Duke.
Huh?
Duke?
Duke. You're right. Duke. All right, the white horse. Now, late John Wayne. He even says the name of the horse in his last movie. What was John Wayne's last movie? The Shooters. Okay. He mentions the name of his horse.
Old dollar.
I'll give it to you. Dollar. All
Oh,
right.
he was old.
All right, here we go. We all grew up. out of the night comes the horseman known as
Zorro.
Zorro.
Zorro. That's right. Now then, what was Zorro's horse name? But give me the Spanish pronunciation.
On the one.
No, it's not Don Juan.
Tornado.
Tornado. All right.
Right.
Very good. Very good. Now I want you to know horses have resumes. I am on a horse's resume. Did you ever see the movie Rough Riders?
Indeed, we did.
I'm in the movie Rough Riders. Most people don't recognize me in that movie. I'm in that movie. I get a credit and everything in that movie. Okay? But see, when I did the movie Gettysburg, I looked like this, General A.P. Hill. Tom Berenger, who played General Longstreet in Gettysburg, he was doing Rough Riders and he was going to portray Teddy Roosevelt. And he says, Pat, you want to be in Rough Riders? I'll take care of you. But you got to shave your beard and cut your hair really short. If you want, you can keep your big black mustache. I go, absolutely, that's great. So I got to be in the movie Rough Riders. Most people, I say 99% of the people don't even recognize me in that movie. I want you to know, before going to Texas to film that movie, I was in Hagerstown, Maryland. My wife and our good friend Dennis Fry came up to Joan and said, Joan, where's Pat? And what did she say? He's standing right over here. He didn't recognize me. So most people don't recognize me in Rough Riders. So if you want to find me in Rough Riders, just look for Groucho Marx on horseback. Okay, that's what you got to do. But the name of the horse was Guy. Richard Gere rode Guy in Somersby. Cooper Huckabee rode Guy in Gettysburg. Remember Cooper Huckabee, the scout?
Yeah.
Some may call him a spy, but I call him a scout because he's on my side. Okay? And I rode Guy in Rough Riders. And Brian Mallon, who played General Hancock in Guys and Generals, also rode
Oh, okay.
Guy. So y'all passed the test. And as I end my program right now, I want everybody deep down inside to go home and at the loudest you can make, call out the name you're about to call out right now. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Done! All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And if anybody's interested in any of the A.P. Hill flags, also, as I said, back in January 2023, on January the 21st, we had the funeral. You actually can come up if you want and see the picture of me by the casket during the eulogy of A.P. Hill. And I have replica flags of this. And on November the 9th in Culpeper at 2 o'clock that afternoon, they're going to unveil an obelisk over his gravesite. So you're all welcome to come to that. 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Fairview Cemetery in Culpeper. And every year on April 2nd in Petersburg at the death marker of A.P. Hill, I do a special memorial service honoring him. I've been doing this for well over 20 years,
Oh, right.
just to keep his memory alive because he's known as Lee's forgotten general. So if you're interested, come see me afterwards. I have flags over here, the A.P. Hill flags, the Virginia unreconstructed flag. And if anybody has any questions right now about General Nuisance, General Delivery, General A.P. Hill, and their war horses, I'm here for you. If not, let's saddle up and get home safe. Good night, everybody.
Any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Why do you have so many disputes with Longstreet and Stonewall Jackson?
Are we gonna be here for another couple of days? In a nutshell. All right. Hill and Stonewall Jackson never got along. Thomas Jonathan Jackson, okay? A.P. Hill was a fun-loving guy. Yeah, he'd do all right in his studies and everything, but if he had any free time, he'd go to Benny Havens and have a few drinks or what have you, okay? Stonewall Jackson, Thomas Jonathan Jackson, Cadet Jackson, was very stern. He lived by, it is not desirable to have a large number of friends. And then what happened was that Cadet Jackson graduates a year before A.P. Hill. He gets brevetted 3 times in the Mexican War. No other American officer is brevetted more than Jackson. And then Hill was always in the shadow of Jackson, always. All right, Longstreet and Hill have differences because during the 7 days battle, which I mentioned earlier, A.P. Hill and the Light Division were getting a lot of press coverage. Everything was about, you know, the Light Division, A.P. Hill, and Longstreet didn't like all this publicity. So he decided to write to the rival newspaper, the Richmond Whig, and getting his version of the story. And so there was a big feud between the two of them. There was a newspaper war between the Richmond Examiner and the Whig. And so A.P. Hill decides to challenge Longstreet to a duel. And so Robert E. Lee decides, no, I can't have this. So he transfers A.P. Hill out from under the command of Longstreet and puts him under the command of the person he doesn't like, Stonewall Jackson. And Jackson puts Hill under arrest several times. And so there's this big feud, excuse me. And so Hill and Jackson never get along, never, because Jackson was always so secretive. And Hill wanted to know what the hell's going on. Okay. And the thing about it hurt during the Battle of Gettysburg. Jackson is no longer with us. Battle of Gettysburg occurs. And you got the first corps headed by Longstreet, the second by General Ewell, and the third corps by A.P. Hill. And so what happened is that there was no communication between that third day, which is known as Pickett's Charge, but I call it the Pickett-Trumbull Charge, because 2/3 of those attacking forces was under A.P. Hill. So when Longstreet and Hill got together, they still had bad blood between the two. And then there was no communication. So when they decide to do what they ended up not doing, is that no handshake, no salute, they just walk away. So it was the understanding of General Longstreet that A.P. Hill was going to command his 2 divisions that were part of the attacking force. And A.P. Hill thought that being that Longstreet is, you know, senior to him, that Longstreet was going to control the entire attacking force. So it was a breakdown of command right then and there. So that's why, you know, A.P. Hill, as I said, he was a proud man. And if anybody felt that he was being dishonored or anything like that, he would fight them. He wouldn't let anybody get away with it at all. Any other questions about General Hill? No?
One more.
I'm here.
Did A.P. Hill know Burnside personally?
Mm-hmm.
He did.
Yeah, they were roommates at West Point. And they were very good friends throughout, when they were both in the Army during the Mexican War and after the Mexican War. They were very close. Very, very good friends. Of course, A.P. Hill was a Virginian and Burnside's up in the north. And the thing about it is that A.P. Hill came from a wealthy family. They didn't have any slaves, they were merchants. And they were wealthy, you know, they had money. Burnside himself was a notorious gambler. And so at one point before the war, General Burnside borrows $8,000 from A.P. Hill. And the war comes and he never pays them back. And so deep down inside, A.P. Hill wanted Burnside to pay for that $8,000 loan. It was a lot of money back then, absolutely. But on September 17th, 1862, when up came Hill at the Battle of Sharpsburg, but you call, all right, you're awake. Antietam, A.P. Hill came up and who did he say to? Burnside's man. That's right, that's right. And so A.P. Hill sort of like, you know, got his revenge.
$8,000.
That was a lot of money back then. Yeah. Burnside never paid him that. And the sad thing about it is that after A.P. Hill died, I didn't spoil it for anybody. The second that after the war, Burnside never offered any of that money to the widow, A.P. Hill's widow. He should have. But he's widow. Anybody on that? Yes, way in the back.
Antietam,
Antietam?
Sharpsburg, Antietam.
Which one you want me to answer first? Oh.
Okay. Was that the night New York Zoo officer got pushed off? The were under Burnside?
Well, they were there, and also
Yeah.
Connecticut, 14th Connecticut really got the hell beat out of them, basically. And they were new recruits too. Yeah, it was New Yorkers, but mostly Connecticut troops.
And then some New Yorkers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that, hey, the amazing thing that gets me more than anything else is that A.P. Hill starts out. Okay, 5,000 men on the road, Harper's Ferry. He could have gone 12 miles pushing his men. He ends up going 17 miles because there were reports of other Union, divisions in the area, and he didn't want to get into a confrontation with them because he knew Robert E. Lee needed help, and he was the only one who could help him. And so he pushed his men, 5,000. By the time he gets to Butler's Ford, he loses 500 men right then and there. And he finally gets to the battlefield. He gets 3,000 men, so he loses 2,000 on the road, and he utilizes 2,000 men. But those 2,000 men, I mean, what they had gone through, 17 miles, 7 hours, choking, and some even suffered heart attacks. They finally get to the battlefield, and then they got to go into action. It was amazing what they accomplished. And the late great Ed Bars has said this, and my wife was there, and then he said that on that particular day, September 17, 1862, A.P. Hill was the best general on either side. So I mean, you got to take it from Ed Bars. He was there.
He was there, yeah.
He was there. Well, ladies, one more question. Okay, and it's better be the last one.
What happened to A.P. Hill?
Died.
Oh.
He died. No, what happened? April 2nd. Okay. All right, it's Petersburg, and Robert E. Lee always said that if it comes to a siege, it's only a matter of time. Well, it was a 9-month siege, and the Confederacy was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and then the army was always getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so early that 1865, January, February, A.P. Hill is not a well person at all. He takes a leave of absence, sick leave. He finally comes back because he wants to control his old Third Corps, even though he's not a well man at all. So on April the 1st, he rides around the perimeter there of his light division, and he's in excruciating pain. He's a dying man. His chief of couriers, Sergeant Tucker, said, our general is an invalid right now. Every time, he would ride, he had flank pain. And like I said, he had all these illnesses. He was not a healthy person at all. And so he goes to bed, and then around midnight, April 2nd, he wakes up, and then in the distance, he could hear cannon fire, thunder. His wife is with him. She's 7 months pregnant. He has his 2 little girls with him. He gets up, instead of putting on his red battle shirt, he put on a white linen shirt his wife had made for him, puts on his shell jacket, puts on his cape, puts on his hat, and he rides over to Robert E. Lee's headquarters, right there, some miles away. And so he's there, and he gets to be around 2 o'clock in the morning. And then Longstreet is there also. Longstreet, Lee, and Hill are conferring about what's the next move is going to be. And then about an hour later, word gets that A.P. Hill's section of that area in Petersburg is broken through by the Yankees. A.P. Hill gets on his horse, Champ. This is another horse, Champ. And takes with him Sergeant Tucker and Trooper Jenkins. They ride because they want to get to the section there so Hill can rally the troops. So what happened was that as they're riding on the Boyne Plank Road, and it's getting near, just like about 5:30, close to 6 o'clock in the morning, they see 2 Yankees in the road. And so Hill and the other 2 companions, they take out their pistols and they go up to those 2 Yankees and call out for them to surrender, and they do. And so those 2 Yankees that were on the Boyne Plank Road were taken by Trooper Jenkins back to be interrogated by Robert E. Lee. So now it's like 6:15. Light is coming through the trees that they're riding on because they want to get to the headquarters of Harry Heath, who was commander of that section of the field. And so they see a company of Yankees on the road. Too many for those 2 to handle. So Hill and Sergeant Tucker start to ride to this wooded area. And Hill turns to Tucker and says, if anything should happen to me, you must report it to General Lee. And so now they're going through, and there's 2 members of the 138th Pennsylvania, Corporal John Mark and Private Dan Roper, behind a tree. And they see these 2 Confederates getting closer and closer and closer. They're on horse. They don't know who they are. And then Hill and Tucker see those two Yankees, they have their pistols out. And all of a sudden, Hill calls out for them to surrender. Those two Yankees get their 58 caliber Enfields and fire away. The bullet fired by Dan Weldon, it passes, okay? And then the bullet fired by Mark hits Hill, goes through his thumb, cuts his thumb off, continues into his heart, reaches to his heart and kills him instantly. He is dead before he hits the ground. Tucker remembers A.P. Hill's last order. If anything should happen to me, you must report it to General A.P. So he grabs Champ, A.P. Hill's horse, and rides off to tell of the death of A.P. Hill to Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee hears this, and in a choking voice, his tears flow in his eyes. He says, he is now at rest, and we who are left are the ones to suffer. And on April 9th, Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia. If you read Douglas Outlaw Freeman in R.E. Lee and Lee's lieutenants, not only does Lee have Colonel Marshall with him, he also has a courier, Sergeant Tucker, riding Champ, A.P. Hill's horse, according to Douglas Southwell Freeman.
And was his body recovered?
Boy, we got another show tonight.
That's a
All right, here's the thing. A.P. Hill was buried 4 times. As they say, it's tough to keep a good man down. Okay? All right, here we go. Boy, you're getting 2 talks at the price of 1, ladies. All right, he's killed. So they want to bring the body to Richmond. Don't forget he's in Petersburg. Bring it to Richmond to be buried in Hollywood Cemetery, the place of heroes, where Jeb Stuart is buried. Okay, and other generals are buried there. James J. Archer, a lot of them are buried there. But at that time, on April 2nd, Yankees were going through the town, city, and there's no way in the world are they going to be able to bury him right there in Richmond. So they think maybe we can bring him up to his hometown of Culpeper, which is 100 miles away. But that's kind of dangerous because first of all, the man was not embalmed, and you're in an old wagon, and then you're going 100 miles. What are the chances that, you know, Yankees might come by and stop that wagon because his wife is in the wagon there and, you know, members of his staff. So they said, okay, the nearest cemetery is a private cemetery, the Winston Cemetery. So 2 days after he was killed, it's April the 4th. He gets buried in the cemetery. A couple of years later, they said, no, he should not be buried here. Let's bring him to Hollywood Cemetery. So 1867, okay, the first time, no military honors at all. The second time, they bury him in Hollywood Cemetery. No fanfare, no military, you know, honors or anything. They put his little name on the side of the road. It says Lieutenant General A.P. Hill. That's it. No great marker. Well, this occurs, and then members of the 3rd Corps, A.P. Hill's Corps, and the Light Division, they decided to form the A.P. Hill Monument Association to raise money for a monument honoring their general. So they raised enough money because in 1890, Robert E. Lee had a great equestrian statue right there in Richmond. So they wanted to put a statue up, but not a great equestrian statue of A.P. Hill. They wanted to have something that's not going to be in the shadow of Robert E. Lee. So Louis Ginther had this real estate area business, and he's starting a development. So he thought that this would be a good place to put the remains of A.P. Hill under a statue there. So 1892, May 30th, Memorial Day, there's a ceremony. But you see, the year before, they put A.P. Hill in the base of that monument that's going to be unveiled the next year. No military honors, nothing. So when it happens on 1892, on that Memorial Day, 15,000 people show up. 15,000 to honor the general. But it's not for him in the ground. That happened a year earlier. It's basically for the monument and, you know, to honor him, but it's not, you know, the fanfare about a funeral for him. So that stood there for 130 years. And then when all this business occurred with the monuments coming down all over, not only Richmond, but other cities and stuff, A.P. Hill was last man standing because that was his grave. Finally, the powers that be in Richmond decided to bring it down. So on December 22nd, no, December 12th, 2022, the headstone, let's call it, comes down. Then the next day, December 13th of 2022, they finally recover his remains. And then finally, Andrew Moorhead, who's in charge, the funeral director, and John Hill, who's the closest collateral descendant to A.P. Hill, decide that he should be buried in Culpeper. And then that's when I got the call, because I've been honoring the general since over 30 years. And so they asked me to do the eulogy, probably the greatest honor ever in my life. I got to do that, come up and see the picture. And then after it was all over, I mean, it was just something, because they asked me to go 20 minutes. Well, I went half an hour. I mean, it was so emotional that at one point, see, they had a whole military funeral. They had the ride in this horse, you know, with the boots on backwards and everything like that, you know, with the stirrups and everything. And when I mentioned in my eulogy about General Lee's last words, tell A.P. Hill he must come up. The horse whinnied. You couldn't ask for anything better. You couldn't do that in a movie and be believable, but it happened. And then finally, they took the flag off the casket, lowered the casket, and John Hill gave me the flag, so I have it in a place of honor in my house. And so he had a 21 gun salute, had a cannon fired 3 volleys, so he truly got what he deserved, a true military funeral. He finally got that. And so now, on November 9th, his 199th birthday, we're gonna put an obelisk over there just to honor him. But we are hoping somehow, some way, if we can get enough funds from like selling these flags, that there will be a court case. And maybe, just maybe, because that truly is a headstone, we can at least recover that and honor the general. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Fantastic.
Well, here you are, sir.
Oh, thank you. Oh, token to get on the subway.
There you go.
Another hat. Okay, great. Thank you.
So let's give Pat another night.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Don't forget, we do have some books back there for sale if you're looking for it. Remember, next Thursday at the Middletown Library, Lincoln, Grant, Friends of Lincoln. If the field trip is available this coming Saturday, and we have one a month away. And we'll see you all next month. We're going to have Scott over to talk about Antietam. He only has a 3-volume set of it. So.
And I'm putting these brochures in the back, so if you want to take them when you go to Gettysburg. And if anybody's interested in the flag, come see me up front. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming.